Uh, Hello, I'm Christian McMahon. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm a redheaded white guy with wire rim glasses, wearing a green shirt and sitting in my most presentable corner of my living room.
Love the description. It's nice meeting you, Christian. My name is Matthew Argame. I use pronouns he, him, his. Description of where I'm at. So I recently colored my hair blonde. So there's that. I'm a Filipino American, and I am wearing gold and red spectacles. So I shouldn't say glasses.
I like spectacles.
Yeah, and I'm wearing only one of my two hearing aids because the other one, I think my dog ate it. So
Oh no!
yeah, and I don't know. So I'm gonna have to find some or work to find a new hearing aid soon.
Yeah, and if you ever need me to repeat anything I've said, just say the word.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about the past and future and a little bit about the present of the ADA and its impacts in our lives. So I guess I'm really curious because I know you're a lot younger than me, which is really funny. This is the first time I've been asked to be like representing the past, and I'm like, oh, it hurts a little.
Oh.
But I think it also illustrates how new of like how 30 years really isn't very much time. Like this law is pretty new. But I would love to know, when were you sort of first aware of the ADA? Like how did that sort of shape your sense of yourself as a person with disabilities?
Yeah, so I would say, honestly, the Department of Rehabilitation has been transformative for me, in giving me the possibility of a future. Like I struggled silently with my hearing loss and with untreated Tourette syndrome and ADHD, sort of isolating myself in order to do well in school. But I knew it wasn't sustainable for me. So I was really happy that I reached out to my childhood audiologist, and she recommended me to Department of Rehab in 2013. So in 2013, that's where I feel like I really started to be more proactive in being part of society, as I am. I love your article in BuzzFeed where you say I think it was to exist as full citizens, to exist, just to be recognized as you are in society. So I really like that. Yeah, and I think, so 2013, and it wasn't until I started following Department of Rehabilitation initiative on ADA that I started to really connect the dots, if you will, like seeing how much work has been done since, the passing of the IDEA Act, as you mentioned in your article, and then the ADA Act like a decade and a half later. So it really made me think like, wow, I'm able to pursue my dreams and pursue my hopes to become a physician with disability, in spite of disability, because of so many people who have come before me. And the fact that people have fought to make sure like those structural changes have been made is, I don't know, it gives me a lot of hope. And so that's why I learned about ADA, and I'm obsessed now. Like I want to learn more.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm old enough that, I was about 10 or 11 when it passed and was signed into law. And so I think witnessing that at that age when I was really like, obviously I was a little kid, but like that kind of critical point of childhood where you're like old enough to kind of know that things are happening outside of your bubble.
Yeah.
And I think it was really formative for me to see that and sort of realize like, I suppose like when I was growing up, people would always say like, oh, but you're not really a disabled person, like, because you're so whatever. And like, that was always, I mean, it's always meant as a compliment, even if people still say it. But like, I guess seeing the ADA pass made me question that really hard, where I'm like, no, I am disabled, and that's cool. Like,
yeah.
yeah, where it's like, no, it's just fine. There's like, so that part of the work was really inspiring to me, as far as like realizing sort of how much, well, I didn't realize at the time how much work had gone into it. That took me till much later, but like sort of realizing that like disability was something you could claim and like be proud of.
Mhm.
I think was pretty fundamental to the passing of the ADA, and then like just
Yeah.
seeing the changes that have like taken place,
Mhm.
because there really weren't like things that are just ubiquitous now, like accessible
Mhm.
restrooms, but then also like curb cuts and like
Mhm.
things that have just sort of blurred into the background, like just didn't exist.
Mhm.
So yeah, I also am very fond of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Yeah, no, and
Yeah.
even I don't know, and like, I mean, we're supposed to be talking about the past and the future of the ADA and where we'd like to see things going, but I also think it's really important during a pandemic to sort of like
Yeah.
discuss the present
Well,
of it.
what's happening now? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, and I'm really happy that DOR is posting so much about the ADA, because so much of the news and our current federal administration is really oppressive and really demeaning, and so sometimes it hurts, and it feels like we're going back in the past. And but like with this, I feel like it's bringing to the forefront like what work is being done within the government, what structures do exist. um that way we can find more people who are still wrestling with disability, in silent, and people who, I feel like it gives us a structure in the government to still give us hope and to still pursue our future. So you're right, like in the present, I think now more than ever, it makes it, at least it makes me feel like I need to be, it makes me want to be more proactive, in like addressing these larger issues. And yeah, and like in 2013, when I started to like, wear my hearing aids consistently and, seek treatment for the Tourette syndrome and the ADHD, um, like I was like, that's when like simultaneously the possibilities for a future opened up and like treatment opened up, but at the same time, the discrimination, the attacks, and then even like past trauma sort of open up, because you're realizing, oh wow, like I was being treated that way because this. And so
Yeah,
yeah, so it's a lot. Yeah.
that is, and I think that's really um, what you said about like, oh, I was being treated this way because of this. Like, I definitely see a lot of like sort of quick regression and like perception of disability and access and that kind of thing, where it is just like, everything is up in the air at every aspect of life. So
Yeah.
disability gets immediately like shoved as
Yeah.
like something that was like, oh, we're just doing that because it's nice. And it's like, no, this is like actually our civil rights. And the ADA is the law that says
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, but I do also feel very hopeful in this moment, because there is, thinking about the 30th anniversary of the ADA really made me realize like how much work disabled advocates and activists have been doing for so long. And it's like, well, like the odds were so much worse. like, like,
Yeah.
there are people who invented, or I mean, insisted, not invented, they insisted on civil rights out of,
Hmm.
centuries of oppression and people not even
Yeah.
realizing that that was a thing that anybody would even want. like,
Hmm.
so I find that that's actually, I mean, there's a lot of really atrocious things going on right now, but also it makes me hopeful that it's like, okay, but we have the ADA to stand on and we just have to keep pushing forward. Um, yeah, I guess. I don't know. So what would you like the future to look like with the ADA and disability rights generally? Like what would your ideal world be?
Oh wow. The ideal world honestly would be like tapping into what people with disability have because I feel like there are so many skills we can give with our differences, and so much of our differences are just treated as something that's going to be a hindrance to an institution or to a profession, something that's going to be, or even the counter to that, something as someone else can feel like, oh, you know, like a little bit of pity and like, oh, let me help you.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, we're like, we have skills, talents with our differences, and we could really help change the world with those. So I think moving forward, I want to see that. I want to see the connections being made from like federal level, you know, through the ADA, and then working that into institutions and into hospitals and clinics. Yeah, and I mean, like, me as someone with disability trying to be a doctor, like, I've witnessed so many forms of discrimination. And even one of my friends who has a hearing loss, she applied and she got interviewed, and one of the interviewers asked her, because she wrote about, you know, hearing loss and the advocacy she's done and the difficulties of living with hearing loss in a hearing world. And the interviewer asked her, like, are you sure you're even capable of being a doctor since you have this disability? And I'm like,
Wow.
wow. And she's already in the interview phase. She's clearly speaking and listening and hearing to all
Yeah.
of these, to the panel of interviewers. So I was like, that's not appropriate. And then even recently, I applied for a scholarship to be a medical commissioner, as a medical physician commissioner. And then instantly, simply with a diagnosis, I was disqualified. And they didn't even take into account that, okay, there's treatment for us to get to be as
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah.
And so it's like, just the label itself, you know, an institution can really gatekeep access to a future.
Yeah.
And it's just very problematic. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on so many different levels. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I'm sorry you had that experience, and it's unfortunately one that I'm sure you're not alone in.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think there is, yeah, there is a lot of work to be done. And I think with the, I don't know, now I'm looking at my notes, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I have the email up too saying what our structure was going to look like. Just
But yeah, no, I think that at least for me, the solution to that kind of discrimination is basically like, we just have to keep persevering until we can get into the positions of power to be able to be like, no, we're not doing that anymore. Like, it's just not,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like, we're just gonna, you know, cancel all of the weird discriminatory practices in the world, and let everybody get on with whatever they want to do with their lives. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
which is, I mean, you know, it's a pretty sentence, but I think that there's a lot of work that has to go on to get there. But also, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so I'm a writer, and then also I'm the program and communications director for the ARC of California, which is an organization that advocates for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I just think that there's like a thing that when I took the job, I was like, okay, I have to do everything. Like, I have to fix all the problems, like, right now. It's on me. I've taken this job. I'm going to solve everything. And I think a thing that I sort of keep in my head as a mantra is like, okay, but like there's a lot of people here who are like doing this work. Like, it's on me to do as much as I can and bring the skills that I have that are unique, but like, also, you know, I think it's important for people doing, I mean, any people with disabilities, like, I think we all sort of universally feel like, have had the experience of feeling a little bit like maybe we're the first person to do something, or like we have to be responsible for everything in our communities. And it's like, it's a lot of pressure. And I think
Hmm.
if you step back and realize that lots of people are doing this work and you just do the part you can do and take care of
Mm. Yeah.
everything, like
Hmm.
that's how we'll get anywhere. I don't know, because I think that's
Yeah.
really how it's been,
That's
I guess.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I felt the same way. And I'm so glad you bring that up because I think it is very uh, common for a lot of us who finally found an outlet or felt like, yes, I was once silenced, I was once marginalized, I was once,
Absolutely.
feel so isolated. When we find a community, when we find support, it's like it ricochets. It's like, oh, now I need to do everything for everyone and figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, at the expense of our own health sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And
No,
so,
and
yeah,
it's
I think self-care is very important in the kind of work that we're doing.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I wanted to ask you also, what do you see, um, what changes would you still like to see be made to make the world more equitable, and even like what your vision is for like the ideal world for people with disabilities? I'm just
Yeah.
asking the question you asked me.
No, I know. I love that. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess my ideal world, I mean, I think within disability, there's still a lot of division and hierarchy, and I would like to see that disappear, especially as far as like when it concerns like Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Like, I feel like they get excluded from some of the conversations that are happening, or just aren't listened to. um, and same with like queer people with disabilities and just, multiply marginalized people in general. It's like,
Yeah.
there's disparities. Even when we have laws like the ADA or services that are set up, there's disparities in how those are accessed by
Uh,
multiply marginalized people. So I would like that to be over. And I would also, I would like to create a society that's so equitable that like you can like I mean I joke not joke but like yeah, I mean I guess it's a joke. It's a sad joke, but I'm like, oh yeah, like I have job security because I'm doing advocacy for people with disabilities, and it's like there's not going to be one thing we're going to do where it's going to be like, oh, we solved it.
mhm.
Like, and I
Yeah.
that actually is the future that I would like to see. Like I would like
Yeah.
to put myself out of a job as an advocate where it's like, no, everything is equitable. And obviously that's a very uh, well, I don't know if it's unrealistic, but it's a very future future goal. But I would like to, see a society where like there is true equity for people and we really all do have the same opportunities to pursue the
Mhm.
things that are meaningful to us,
Mhm.
and the supports that we need to be able to pursue them in a
Mm.
meaningful way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's so important. And I was just having a discussion with one of my friends, and she told me that when she was at Boston University, one of her physics professors, it's like she did really well. She scored the top,
Awesome.
yeah, she did the best in the midterm. But then the professor, told her like, you know, women, especially women of color, typically have a difficult time being
Ooh.
in this field. So, just because you did really well, don't get your hopes up. And it was just like,
Whoa.
whoa. And I
That's
mean, that
yeah.
it, I mean, how do we stay in, how do we pursue our goals as like, professionals in STEM, in medicine, in engineer, in all of these different fields,
Yeah.
um, without being discriminated on so many different fronts. And so
Yeah.
what you bring up about like job security and advocacy, like some people are doing have to do both at the same time, but sometimes we're pushed to just doing advocacy work because we're pushed out of certain fields. And you're absolutely right, like sometimes I worry about like, whoa, like at some point I was doing just advocacy work in undergrad, and like
Yeah.
I even had to switch my majors because I got so overwhelmed
Yeah.
with all the advocacy stuff. And I was like, whoa, I need a future too, though, like a stable job and where I can do
Yeah.
both, like advocate and change a system that I'm going to be in, which is healthcare.
Yeah.
So yeah, everyone has advocacy can be done little or large, from policy to simply changing what's happening in the institution you're serving.
Exactly, exactly. No, and I think that's a really important point that you make, where it's like, yeah, there's like professional advocacy and like air quotes, but like really, we're all doing advocacy all the time just by being who we
Yeah,
are. Like,
good. We are, yes.
yeah, and being whoever we are, wherever we go, where it's like, well, yes,
Yeah.
hello, I am here. Like, you are now going to have to, figure out how to deal with me and vice versa. So that's really
Yeah.
that, yeah, advocacy can be done in any field, and it needs to be done in every field, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every field. Yeah.
Literally just everywhere all the time.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I think that's good. And I'm here for it. And yeah, and I do feel weirdly optimistic despite everything that's going on
Mhm.
currently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have anything in closing, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I'm just really glad we had this discussion. And I love that this discussion is, even though we focused a lot on the present, it's still like intergenerational. We're learning about what's happened in the past,
Yeah.
our hopes for the future, and even like what are we struggling with right now. But even like what are we struggling right now, like that still points to, okay, there's work that can be done to help us move the future in a better direction. And I mean, I think I just quote, like for me, the last thing I'll probably add is like the quote from Kate D. Davidson, who's done a lot of advocacy work for queer communities, for communities of color, for the disabled community. Um, and they say, I take risk by acting out of love and a framework of intersectionality. I listen, I speak up, I show up. I am vulnerable and I dream. I practice living by the quote, speak your truth even if your voice shakes.
That is, oof, that's a beautiful quote.
Yeah, I look at that every day in case it's just my like voice gets shaky because I'm like, so many intersectional issues that it needs to be
Oh, no, that's
said.
wonderful. No, and their work is amazing. So thank you for thinking to share that quote. That's gorgeous. All right. Well, I mean, thanks
Any,
for having the chat with me. This was
yeah,
awesome. I really appreciate it.
yeah, I'm excited. I'm happy we had this talk, and I'm sure we'll keep in touch and have more
Please.
conversations about how to make the future more equitable and just.
Yeah. No, please. I would love that.